It's an honor to be with you all today to help introduce our next speaker, AFN National Chief Sydney Woodhouse Nepinak. She was born and raised in Pinaway-Mootang First Nation in Manitoba. She is the youngest First Nations woman and mother to hold the position of National Chief. Please help me welcome her to the stage to provide her opening address to Chiefs in Assembly.
Well, I think I'm getting old now. No. Anine, hello. Good morning, everybody. It's such an honor to be here today and be with you here on the unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. And I want to acknowledge and hold up our host drum, the Spirit Wolf drum singers. I also want to uphold the water singers. What a beautiful, beautiful song. Thank you so very much, Regional Chief. They've got such beautiful voices. Really touched me this morning. So I also want to thank Claudette Commanda, our knowledge keeper, for opening up this assembly in a good way with her prayer. We recognize the Eagle staffs and all the ceremonial items in this room. We acknowledge Chief Serzan for welcoming us to his territory, to their territory. We also send our love and strength to First Nations and first responders helping to battle floods and fires across the country. And just last night, unfortunately, one of our communities completely burnt down from fire, and it was very, very disheartening. So my heart goes out to Chief Helen Pavola, who I had the honor of seeing late last night, and she's now going home to see the evacuees coming from her community into Thunder Bay. And so our thoughts go out to the Megus Sigagem First Nation. We honor them, and please lift them up in prayer as their entire community has been devastated. We also lift up Regional Chief Benedict, Grand Chief Linda Bossegay, and chiefs from across Ontario for welcoming us this week and for your ongoing advice and inspiration. We appreciate your leadership on water, on policing, on the border, just to name a few. You do such good work. Also with Chief Fiddler at Anishinaabe Nation, your success in finalizing a Canada-Ontario agreement on long-term reform of the First Nations child welfare system is leading the way. It's been an honor to stand with you on this file, so I want to say congratulations. Speaking of advocates for children, I also want to personally recognize, where's Quebec? There he is. Regional Chief Paul for his work over this past year on this difficult file. We are so grateful for your passion and your patience. It has been a great honor to be serving all of you since 2023. As a national political organization, of course, the AFN has been advancing inherent rights and advancing treaty rights through the co-development of policy of public education and legislation for over 49 years. In March, we attended the BC Assembly of First Nations in Penticton, and we thank Chief Gabriel for welcoming us there, because that is where the AFN started after the National Indian Brotherhood. The AFN started there 49 years ago. It'll be 50 years next year. And the AFN is where it started for me. Before I go on, though, I do want to say, and it's not in my, but I always want to do this, because we're always told that as parents, and I know that, as we age, I'm the youngest of 5 children. I have a whole bunch of brothers. I have no sisters. I wish I did. But I have all older brothers, and but my parents are here, and I'm so glad that you are. So if my mom and dad, if you could just stand up and take a wave. These are my parents, Lorette and Garnet Woodhouse. But and through everything that they've been through, they both went to day school. They have horror stories that they share and tell me every day, and I'm just glad that you're both here and you're well. So thank you for being here for me. When I was 3 years old, I had attended my first, we didn't have much, but we drove from Manitoba to attend the Assembly of First Nations in Vancouver at that time, and Mom and Dad drove there. My dad was a counselor, and he supported our chief, and we drove. And I remember there was no air conditioning in the car, and it was awful, but we made it. And I was so happy to see the BC chiefs at that time. Your culture and your strength was because we were coming from somewhere where all that was hidden still in the 80s, right? So we've come a long way, and we have a long way to go. Today, my role, of course, is always to advocate for each of you, for your priorities, as directed as well by Chiefs in Assembly, to protect our collective and our inherent rights. And we can't do this work without a strong AFN National Executive. So I want to personally thank all of our regional chiefs from coast to coast to coast for your work and your leadership. We also thank our Elders Council, the AFN staff that are here, advisory councils, and the chiefs from all over this beautiful country for your prayers, your thoughtful advice over the past few years. And we welcome you to our 2026 AFN Annual General Assembly. We've got close to 3,000 delegates this year, this summer. That's a lot. And, close to 400 chiefs are here. Many of them are also online. Our trade show sold out quickly. Our golf tournament also sold out within 5 minutes. It was very, very quick. And, we have many cabinet ministers attending this week with a diverse range of members of parliament from all political stripes, Canadian senators. We are thankful to the media as well that are here, documenting this entire day, and we appreciate the important work that they do. We have representatives from Crown agencies, the private sector, from education, institutions, and environmental organizations. I think I also saw a few bankers here earlier. And we have a full agenda with over 50 resolutions on the schedule. So we are thankful and happy to get started, and very happy to see you all here. There's a lot of interest because First Nations are leading the way in all walks of life across Canada. We were also very happy to see the Toronto Maple Leafs add to that list last month by drafting Yukon's Gavin McKenna first in the NHL draft. We're so proud of Gavin, and his mom and dad had texted yesterday, and I said to them, what a blessing that you get to be, First Nation parents, that they get to see their son. It's all of our dream, right, as hockey parents, and I just lift them up and wish Gavin and his family well. We also lift up, of course, Carey Price, and for being inducted into the Hall of Fame a couple of weeks before that. So our best to the BC First Nation family. We just love you for paving the way. I'm going to say this, though. Reggie Leach must be next. And, the NHL, the NHL's listening. So First Nations, we are leading the way in so many areas. Yesterday, we met with the new Minister of Artificial Intelligence, Evan Solomon. He recognized the leadership of chiefs and the policy approved by all of you at our last assembly to develop a First Nations-led national AI strategy. But we made it clear to the Minister that there will be no mega AI data centers built on First Nations land without your consent or your participation. First Nations, of course, we also reminded him, can't just be the AI consumers. And if they want to build anything, First Nations need to be at the forefront of building what they wish, leveraging and controlling this technology, particularly with their youth. So we look forward to talking with Canada more about their AI strategy and the many other issues we have been working on over the past year. Just a few years ago, when running for this position, unity was a central piece of my campaign. In the years prior, we went through some difficult years. Well, there is still work to do, and we know we are making progress when we see First Nations leading the way in the media, in Parliament, and across society. It was so nice to see 12 First Nations people in Parliament. I'm so proud of all of them from all political parties. Yeah, Rebecca and Billy Morin, and they're from everywhere. And when Canadians, they stop me on the street, they offer encouragement, I know we are making progress. And we look around this, room, and when we see this week's agenda, we see more than progress. We see hope for the future. At the same time, we all understand this is a difficult time in this country's history. Prime Minister Carney has articulated this reality very well. But First Nations have always stood for this country in difficult times, and we know that this is another one of those times. Every single World War I, World War II, Afghanistan, the pandemic, now the separation, First Nations are at the front of that all the time. That is why chiefs in Alberta have been so strong in standing for unity against right-wing separatists. We have made it clear that any proposal to separate from any province or territory from Canada is fundamentally illegitimate and unconstitutional without the explicit, prior, informed and collective consent of First Nations. We need to make and call it what it is, because Albertans need to know that if they vote to separate from Canada, that they're not taking the land with them. So we lift the Alberta Chiefs up for their leadership. We are united behind you. I see many of them here. BC Chiefs were standing up as well for unity when they defeated their provincial government's misguided plan to roll back on the United Nations Declaration, because the alternative would have led to significant disunity. So we lift up all BC Chiefs, and Regional Chief TG, where's my friend? He's here. We lift you up for that, for leading the way on that and taking charge. First Nations have been there for Canada in difficult times because we are fundamental partners in this country. Our ancestors welcomed settlers to these shores, but they also learned through hard experience that if we don't mobilize to protect our rights, that no one else will. Today, our rights are being threatened in new ways, but we are not afraid, far from it. First Nations across the country are stronger than ever. So a lot has happened since we had gathered in December. Immediately following the Assembly, we made the journey to Montreal's airport to receive the artifacts the Vatican finally agreed to release. And that was the work of all of you. That was your work. And I want to thank the 4 young people. A few of them are here. I want to thank you for that they went and picked them up, on the other side of the pond and brought them back home to our people. We lift them up for that, and the elders that were all there. So today we are pleased to report that these relatives are resting just a few minutes away from here, awaiting their final journey home to many of your communities. It was an emotional moment for all of us and an important step forward. But we won't rest until we can bring back more from the Vatican and from other world institutions. They have our things all over the world, so I'll leave that there. I'm also pleased to provide a brief report because it has been a busy first half of 2026. A full session of Parliament just wrapped up. We visited King Charles in May, and we welcomed the new Governor-General Arbour in June. And we congratulate Prime Minister on an excellent choice and pay tribute to Mary Simon for doing such a great job. Thank you, Mary. There's a lot we could cover, but let me start by saying the highlights are being with chiefs in your communities. We started the year in the Arctic with the Dene people. My friend George Mackenzie is here, and we can't thank you enough, Regional Chief Mackenzie, for welcoming us in January, and it was cold. We talked about access to health care, about northern development, and the sovereignty of this beautiful country. And we discussed the sovereignty of our eastern neighbours, the Greenlandic Inuit. Together, we condemn Trump's reckless threats to control Greenland and his illegal threats against this country. Thinking of highlights from the past 6 months, we think of Chief Leroy Denny from the Nova Scotia Regional Chief Paul and our visit with the Mi'kmaq community this spring. With the Eskasoni Chief and Council, we talked about policing, about infrastructure, and of course boys and men's health and mental health. We heard about Nova Scotia's raids on First Nations cannabis operations and called on Canada to finally transfer control onto the territory to First Nations people. And it should go for every commodity. First Nations should be in control. We can't be controlled anymore by federal and provincial governments. On the other side of the country, Chief Jerome Jack welcomed us to his beautiful community on Victoria Island. So thank you, Chief, for having the Assembly of First Nations in your territory. It was a beautiful day, lots of food, salmon, and a good day. And we left more inspired to do more than we can to protect this beautiful earth for our children and double down on our advocacy to close the First Nations infrastructure gap. Back at the top of the country, we were so happy to spend time with chiefs in the Yukon last month and attend the Council's annual assembly. So we thank Yukon Regional Chief Alatini for hosting us and her great work on the executive. Thank you so very much. We discussed many topics with the Yukon chiefs, including plans for a First Minister's meeting this fall, focused exclusively on our issues. During his appearance at our December Special Assembly in December, Prime Minister Carney confirmed his support for a First Minister's meeting on First Nations issues in 2026. Excuse me. The Prime Minister went further in his speech to the AFN, to all of you, saying, "We will lead the agenda." So this First Ministers meeting promises to be unique in many ways, but it will be the first time to focus exclusively on First Nations. Miigwech. Thank you. All respect to them. For the First Ministers meeting, it was all respect to them, but when we got the premiers to agree with us last summer, and the missing piece of that, of course, was the Prime Minister, who confirmed in December, and all respect to other groups of people, but there will be no Métis and no Inuit at that table with us, just us with them. Securing this meeting, it didn't come easy, and part of me, I'm not going to believe it until we are there. We had tough discussions with the provinces last summer, but we lift them up for recognizing that we are now talking about a new Canada now. They can't leave us out anymore. They've left out all of you, all of us, for many years. Beyond the First Ministers meeting, we lift up leaders and national chiefs that have been seeking this opportunity for a long, long time. It has been over 20 years since our last national gathering around the Kelowna Accord. Rights holders should not have to wait 2 decades for the next one. Since December, we have been talking with our executive, with our elders and chiefs across the country about the outcomes that you want to see. We have been talking with leaders that went through the Kelowna Accord and the constitutional conferences of the 1980s. We want to thank everyone that has taken part in those dialogues so far. Through these conversations, general themes have emerged. First, chiefs are united in saying that this national meeting can't be a one and done. That means establishing an ongoing federal, provincial accountability mechanism to ensure that socioeconomic gaps are addressed through deeds and not words, like the King had said when he opened up Parliament last year. Second, chiefs have told us not to rush planning. That's why we propose this meeting for a fall in Ottawa. Among other things, this will ensure time for discussions at this Assembly. Space has been set aside for us to have a dialogue this week. It's a good timing because we can finally confirm today that the Prime Minister's office called and we had that discussion, and they had identified October 26th at the date for the meeting here in Ottawa. So October 26th. To start the conference in a good way, we will also invite First Ministers, the Premier's Prime Minister, to participate in a special ceremony in Ottawa on Sunday, October 25th. This will be a very important meeting at a critical time in this country's history, but as Elder Bill Wilson told First Ministers at the constitutional conferences in the 1980s, and I encourage you all to go look back at those conferences. It's very interesting. Our people have been involved in nation building on this land for 30,000 years. That's what his quote had said. So we look forward to hearing from chiefs on this important opportunity over the coming days. We will announce more with the Prime Minister's office over the coming weeks. Next week, Regional Chief LeBeaube and I will meet with the premiers in Prince Edward Island to keep this momentum going forward. Now, if the federal and provincial governments think that we are going to drop everything for the First Ministers' Conference, they have another thing coming. Along this work, we will ramp up our advocacy on many issues we have been working on since the last Assembly. There is the work being done to eliminate discrimination in the second-generation cutoff in the Indian Act, because First Nations must have the authority to determine their own citizenship. There is our demand that First Nations policing finally be recognized an essential service, and our call for an inquiry into the unacceptable RCMP surveillance of First Nations leadership going back to the 1970s. This includes the call for the full, unredacted release of all documents related to this police surveillance. You deserve to see those notes, and not blacked out either. Like I said, there are many issues, but we will conclude with a few words about the First Nations Clean Water Act and the major projects legislation Parliament will be reviewing in the fall. Both are on the agenda this week, so we look forward to hearing from you on these topics. On the final day of spring, Canada finally released an updated First Nations Clean Water Act and announced a $4.6 billion infrastructure investment. While the funding won't close the gaps, we talk to the chiefs all the time that will put those resources to work. In the spring, we traveled to Saskatchewan to be with Chief Wesley, the leadership, the elders, and the community members. We have offered them and the community of evacuees our full support. So it's disappointing that this new bill fails to clearly designate First Nations rights to clean water, because no sum of money will distract from the red flags we see in this new clean water bill. Sadly, it represents a step back from the progress that was made with Parliament in 2024. And I am going to just remind everybody again that no political party helped us on that. That bill was written, and it was written from people like Grand Chief Linda de Bossiguet, Phil Fontaine, many other people that worked really hard to bring all of you that put that bill together, and you know, for them to play politics with it. And none of the political parties would step up towards the end of Prime Minister Trudeau's last session to pass that bill. Now they've given us a new bill, and you know, source water protection is weak and subject to a provincial veto. Amendments are going to be required, and rights holders, you must be provided with the opportunities to provide your perspectives to the parliamentary committees reviewing that bill this fall. That means committee members need to start traveling to communities that are living through a water crisis every day. They need to see that for themselves. They can't stay in an Ottawa bubble over here. We have similar concerns about the bill that we expect on major projects this fall. In May, we received a discussion paper from the federal government titled Getting Major Projects Built. First, it needs to be stated clearly that the sweeping legislative and policy proposals in this discussion paper will fundamentally alter the way Canada protects or does not protect our planet. After initially providing just 30 days for a response, Canada extended the deadline to July 22nd of this year. Unfortunately, the revised timeline remains inadequate given the breadth of changes proposed. In addition to engagement, we identified other concerns, starting with the proposed one-year deadline to complete all of Canada's impact assessment and decision-making. We have said many times First Nations are for economic growth that will drive Canada's prosperity, but not at the expense of our rights or of the Crown's legal obligations to our people. A one-year timeline principally designed to attract investment subordinates the honour of the Crown to commercial imperatives. Instead, it'll give rise to questions about the legitimacy of approvals made without the Crown appropriately discharging its obligations to First Nations. The federal government can try and set up all the timelines that they want for project approvals, but they can't put a deadline on First Nations rights, and you have rights. But let's be clear. First Nations are for setting targets and accountability. We just wish Canada would show the same level of urgency when it comes to achieving targets they have already agreed to. For example, First Nations are still for closing the First Nations infrastructure gap by 2030, a deadline Canada promised us and committed to all of you in 2023. And we are still for setting targets to eliminate boil water advisories in First Nations communities, like Canada has been doing for the past decade. The federal government should be focused on these targets instead of imposing consultation deadlines that put the environment and First Nations rights at risk. And finally, we are very concerned how this approach to major projects will impact the new First Nations Clean Water Act. Weakening Canada's environmental protection framework will undermine these legislative safeguards, particularly related to source water protection. So the AFN will deliver a full analysis of the federal discussion paper before the new deadline and on July 22nd that reflects our legal review and your deliberations this week. As First Nations, our message is simple and practical, that our rights are our rights and this land is our land. Chiefs, you work unbelievably hard. You put yourself on the lines each day to help your communities. It has been an honour to be standing with you and working for you and advancing your priorities in your communities, guided by your policies, guided by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, guided by the calls for justice and the public inquiry into our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And we will be there with you together, just as our elders and our ancestors has wanted. By strengthening our relations united, we can achieve anything. So have a great assembly. Thank you for being here. Chimigwech, Gigobman. Thank you.